Hey everyone, I'm Allison.
I'm Bryce,
and we're Better Half Reviews. And today we are talking about Space Plague. It's a game designed by Ivan Botero and Juan Alvarez from Bamboo Studio, and it's coming to Kickstarter soon.
In Space Plague, you're one of 4 alien factions that are trying to take over the planet by infesting it with plague.
Alright, so let's check it out. Every game is going to be different depending on the planet that you choose for your game. For your first setup, they recommend using Terra 9, which will give you different terrain tiles, and everyone will have the exact same setup. You also need to pick your faction for the game and the corresponding tokens. Each faction has a starting hand of cards.
You also need to evenly distribute these special planetary cards into the planetary deck. Once evenly distributed, this goes here.
There's a handy player aid to walk you through all the options of your turn.
There's also this handy-dandy first player token, and at the start of the game, it gets passed to the player that was most recently visited by aliens, or who most resembles an alien. That will be Allison. The goal of the game is to produce plagues, move them along the terrain track, and get them onto this planet. The player with the most plagues on this planet at the end of the game wins. So Space Plague is played over different rounds and ends when this planetary deck has been exhausted and the last card has moved off the board here. So to start a round, you start with the production phase. In this phase, you flip out this card from the planetary deck. Here it shows water. So your water terrain tiles will produce an energy. The rest of this information on this planetary card will become important later on once it reaches the planetary event space. But for now, we move on to the player's turn.
So now we move on to the player's turns. Everybody will pick one of the cards in their hand, place it face down, and everyone flips at the same time. And then in turn order, you will do your action. So the card I chose says produce 1 plague. So it has a little red disc. These represent my people, and I can place them on one of these 3 spots representing my ship. So I'll place it here. This card is used, and it will go here. Some of the other cards that you start with are produce a plague captain, and you'll note that it has 2 discs. So you would have 2 stacked up on top of each other, and you could place it somewhere on your spaceship. You can place a shield or do 1 movement. So a shield protects you from any harm that may come upon you for 1 round. However, it stops you from moving. Your other option is to do 1 movement. So 1 movement would just be moving 1 space forward onto a new terrain. There's also the option of buying evolution cards or rolling the energy die. So you roll it, whatever shows up, that's where you place an energy.
If the 2 is rolled, the player receives 2 energy immediately.
So the other option was to buy an evolution card. So you can buy one from the pool. So if I buy this one, the cost is at the top. It would cost 3 energy. I would spend that and gain this card. We'll talk about what these do in a little bit. So then this card lets you do 2 movement, so you can move your plague twice, produce a plague, and that's all you have with your starting hand. Once per turn, you can pay 2 energy to change out the evolution cards to have different options.
Whenever you go to the evolution market, you can buy as many cards as you have energy for. And the cost of the evolution cards is up here in the top left corner. And there are 3 types of evolution cards. Hand cards, as the name suggests, go into your hand. And these will give you extra options for actions when you choose your card towards the beginning of the round. Instant cards get played instantly and then get discarded. Finally, evolution cards go on your player board. They give you a permanent effect to your faction. Sometimes it helps you score points. Sometimes it helps you with different actions. Just depends on the card.
So once everyone has played their card and done their action, you move on to the event phase.
If there is a card in the planetary event spot, you do what that card says. Here, because it's the first round, there is no card that has moved there yet, so there's no planetary event. Once the event phase is done, we move on to the march phase, and in the march phase, all plagues move up the terrain track. If you had multiple plagues, you would start from the plagues that are closest to the planet and work your way backwards, and they all move up 1 space.
So right now we just have 1 plague, we'll just move them up 1. If you happen to have a plague and you move it up into a space that has energy, you would collect that energy. If for some reason there was energy on a space where you already were, you collect that as well.
So now that the round is over, we move on to the production phase again. This card will move over, and we'll flip out a new planetary card. And again, it'll produce an energy on the terrain that it shows. It produces energy in those two spots. In this round, once we get to the event phase, now that we have a card here in the planetary event, we will perform whatever action appears at the bottom of the card. Here, all the plagues on forest or water tiles will be destroyed. So you have to plan out and make sure no plagues are going to be on those tiles during the event phase. Unfortunately, we have a plague on a water tile, so that'll be destroyed. Remember, at the beginning of the game, we distributed these special planets into the planetary deck. These trigger a special event that is named on the planet card. For this planet card, all plagues on forest or planet terrain tiles will be eliminated.
So when you play your last card, you will have no more cards to play with for the next round. So what's called rest, you take every card except for the one that you just recently played, and these will go back into your hand.
And like we already mentioned, once this planetary deck has all been flipped over and then moved off the board, the game will end.
So in the evolution deck, there's cards that let you affect other players as well as yourself. So this one lets you abduct any plague and place it into your ship. So you could take someone else's and put it here. It could be a strategic decision. There's things that let you place shields, skip around, lots of different options. For a more advanced game, there are different player powers available for each of the different factions.
And there's different planets that you can play, which add different terrain tiles and planetary events. So every game's going to be a little bit different.
All right, so that's how you play the game. Let's talk about how we feel about it. Bryce, what are some of the pros?
So I like a lot of the subtle humor in this game. For example, one of the factions is called Flat Earthers, and then how you choose the starting player is, whoever was last abducted by aliens or whoever most resembles an alien. But I think it's just a lot of subtle, funny humor.
Yeah, or like in the back they say inspired by the best conspiracy theories. So yeah, there's just a lot of like fun, silly things in there. So I do like the artwork with it. I like that it kind of brings that fun silliness to it. And I like the art on all the different tiles that you have set up for your game. And so like even though there's like mountains, there's 2 different types of mountains and 2 different types of desert. So you can kind of set up your game and it can just look really cool.
Yeah, I was impressed by that. So every setup does have some repeating tiles, but you can have the different patterns, so it's not like repeating.
Yeah, and I think that'll help because this game, I think you can gear it towards family and also towards gamers. And so like if you're playing with younger people, you can have those 2 different tiles with different colors and help them, remember where to place some of those energy. So I like that has that aspect to it.
Kind of playing off of that, though, one of my biggest cons is that this game can play itself to some extent. Because you're marching, after every round, there's really, not much for you to do except place new cubes out on the board.
Technically. But, see, I think that's, a positive and a negative. So, hear me out. So, if you've had a long day and you don't feel like playing a super strategic game, you can play this and, you don't have to think super hard and the game will continue on, right? But, if you're feeling strategic, it can get pretty interesting. How do you make your choices of where you put your people, your plagues, my bad.
So yeah, I did point out to you there are some considerations where it's you have the 3 starting places on your ship. Maybe you want to put it on the second starting place and not the topmost part of your ship, because it'll move into a place that's gonna
have it removed.
Yeah, have that plague removed. Have one of those planetary events that'll have the plague removed.
Yeah.
But then again, you could just play a card to move it forward another space if you wanted to.
So that's why I think it can work well with families and with adults or gamers, because, the kids will be more just trying to move it further up. But the gamers will be like, well, if I land it here, I can do this, or I can knock this thing off. So I do like that it can scale depending on the level of playability that you have with whoever's playing.
And I will say, as a counter to my negative, there is harder, like more strategic planets.
Yes.
So the first planet really just destroys plagues on certain tiles, but planet number 2 allows you to put plagues on the other person's board, and then that plague becomes the other person's problem, essentially. So the other person can control that plague and how fast they move up, and or slowly they move up. Has to like time when that plague gets destroyed. Otherwise, they're moving that plague all the way up, and it counts as a point for you.
Mm-hmm. So I do like that brings up like the planetary deck where you see what's coming up soon, so you have time to kind of plan for it before it shifts over to the spot where it actually activates. But sometimes if you don't plan carefully enough, you're like, oh no, it's gonna get destroyed, and so you try to use some of your cards to mitigate that. But yeah, so there are interesting choices, and it changes up with your different planets and everything, and the cards that you can purchase to, you make your deck unique. And something else that I do like, and I feel like after playing it the first time, we want to play with it every game, were the player powers. So that is something that, especially coming from board gamers, I really liked that aspect of it because it helped create it. It just made it feel like a little bit more dynamic and even more unique. Where yes, you're building up your deck, but you're not always buying cards. And so sometimes I wanted to use my energy and save it for those powers because I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, they do add a nice element to the game, especially if you're playing with some more like advanced players. If you're playing with kids, you can easily leave it out because I think they might get a little confused by it. But with more advanced players, it adds kind of that asymmetrical player power element to it.
Definitely. All right, so those are our thoughts about Space Plague coming from Bamboo Studio. It's going to be launching on Kickstarter at the beginning of April 2021. So if this sounds interesting, you should definitely check it out. I think it's a game that you can play with family and with gamers, depending on how strategic or take-thatty you want to be.
And I also think it's a great gateway game. You can introduce this to your friends, and then kind of ratchet up the difficulty with the asymmetrical player powers, or kind of the more advanced planets that you're trying to take over that provide more of that strategy and help introduce them or get them kind of more into gaming and kind of that gaming mindset.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a good game to just, play and have fun, and you don't have to take it too seriously. Because, I mean, the concept of it is simple enough where you're just trying to move your plagues into the planet, and whoever has the most wins. That's it. There are other complex things with it, but it's really not too hard to grasp, and it's just silly fun.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and go check out our merch. Links will be in the description. This has been Better Half Reviews.
I'm Allison.
I'm Bryce.
Happy gaming!
Have fun! Blah, blah, blah.
I don't even know.